Hey class, so glad to have seen your videos. It was really a treat to see you guys experiment with making influencer videos. But it's also beyond that. It was to have you understand that the threshold between you and the internet isn't that hard, but it also takes a lot of bravery. It was probably pretty difficult for some of you to make it and probably somewhat weird in some ways. I used to joke around when I taught my YouTubers class that there's always this sort of embarrassment if somebody catches you doing it, but I think an influencer understands that embarrassment and kind of normalizes it. But either way, whether you experience that embarrassment or not, your videos were great. I was really happy to look at them. On the whole, the majority of your responses in relation to the essay and to the Dr. Todd Grande videos were excellent too. Your readings, your media literacy levels are really high. So today I'm going to go over basically a little bit of what that essay was about and why we watched that video, and then give you the next step on our influencer playbook, because we're really in the process of part 2 of influencing and what it means to be a video influencer, or at least an internet influencer, so to speak. So first, the point of my essay was to tell you about the time, I was invited to Salisbury Academy on Media and Global Change in 2017 to talk on the subject of populism. And so some of you actually got this. You understood that the essay was about populism itself, because YouTube is a populist platform. TikTok we'll get to a little bit later in the semester, and I'll touch on that in this semester too, but at the time, TikTok barely even existed in its original form. Populism means taking the common person and making them the power, turning the commoner into the power. It's sort of anti-authoritarian. It's very much a very rapid political format, but it's also a way of getting people to understand that anyone can do it. In my view, in my argument, I believe that reality TV really set us up for this, set us up for the YouTube influencer world. And that's because reality TV predates this, but reality TV was about turning the common person into a TV star. And now, with access, we can do it ourselves. So I think I wanted to point out that halfway through that essay, and the reason I used Tyler Oakley as an example, is because influencers have a set of tools that anyone can use. First and foremost is access. How do we get onto the screen? How do we get to our audience? And that means that you have to have some sort of technology or some sort of way of getting yourself recorded or streamed. And the other side is the distribution. What outlet are you using? What platform are you going to be influencing on? But beyond that, obviously, access comes with financial concerns. You have to be paid, or you have to have some sort of money to afford to be able to do influence. Then, after having access and some sort of way of getting to the technology, there's amplification. Somehow or another, you've got to become amplified. You've got to become visible to others. And we'll get to that in a little bit. And we have to understand that it's not that easy. But amplification can take place by somebody else amplifying you, or you finding a way to amplify yourself. And lastly, and oddly least important, is the algorithm. That is, a lot of people place a lot of weight on the algorithm. And in the next few classes after today, we're going to be going over what is an algorithm, how do algorithms work, and what does it do for us. But believe it or not, influencers are not that reliant on algorithms. They're more reliant on networks, people that connect to them in similar ways. So several of you recognize that, and I'm really proud of you for looking that deep into that essay. Just to point out some of your responses, Ahava noticed that there's a lot of easy ways to have this happen if Samsung pays for it. So some of you noted and read the entire essay and realized that the Casey Neistat video, as empowering and as much as it's a call to action, is fairly dangerous in its rhetoric because it doesn't acknowledge the fact that it's a Samsung commercial. That's a commercial made specifically for Samsung, made by Samsung, for a YouTuber's place. Because there's a win-win situation there. If Samsung helps people become part of the YouTube format, it means more people are participating, which means more profit. Logan recognized that Casey's argument does fall apart in practice. It does. It's kind of the theory of we can't all do it. The theory is that we can't all be influencers, because if we're all influencers, then influence loses power. Further, that Giovanna actually noted that there should be a sort of a jurisdiction on mis and disinformation. And that's because some people that become influencers don't understand that they're partaking in misinformation and disinformation flows. And those misinformation and disinformation flows are taken by being part of the feeling or the emotional grab of trying to be part of a different system. And we don't realize that anybody who has access to being an influencer can be doing influential work. But that means if you're uneducated or you don't have some really good understanding of how to tell the right story, your listeners don't realize that. That's what I was trying to say with great power. Because when you're talking on the camera and you're speaking to your audience, you become the authority. So no matter what you know, whether you know it or not, you're becoming the authority on that information. Nicholas responded by saying, there is a danger in the call to action, but it is complicated. And that is what this class is about. So thank you, Nicholas. That's exactly right. Because it's complicated. There isn't an easy solution or easy answer or easy explanation to any of these processes. Learning how social media operates as a whole is kind of how we understand how these systems operate. And the systems are what's at play. I'm not sure if you've been keeping track of the Facebook news over the last several weeks, but we'll be talking about that over the next couple of lessons, basically to talk about when and how Facebook has understood its harm to its citizens and what it does in response to that. And then finally, Ryan's response, it says, neither good nor bad, but circumstantial. And that's important. It does have to take place within the idea of the circumstances, meaning all of the complicated roles that Nicholas mentioned that make an influencer, who the audience is, what technology they're using, and what audience they're speaking to. So I think that your responses were excellent. My overall point too is that if a bad actor, that means somebody who is not really using the technologies for the good purposes and is aware of their act as a bad actor, they could use these very well-rounded, very well-built tools that we were just talking about to influence people poorly or in terms of badly or in terms of dangerous. They can use the same things and it looks like it's good because we're so used to seeing influencers as good, we don't realize that bad actors are taking advantage of the whole situation. So how do influencers influence? So the rest is we're going to talk about influencers and how they influence, and then your homework of the next steps of what to do as an influencer or a burgeoning influencer. The first thing an influencer does when they're influencing is create content. It's the most reduced word that I really don't like because it's like it reduces everything to just content, whether it's writing, video, whatever. It's content. It's material that somebody's going to be posting somewhere. So there's content that has to be posted. That's what an influencer does first. But there's also this idea of something known as the brand. And we'll be reading that in Gary Vee's thing. Now, I have a complicated feeling with how Gary Vee is. I think not too much of a fan, to be honest with you. But I do think that for a beginner or an entry point, it is a good way to understand how the structures work because his operable stance it works. I mean, it just happens to work. When we get into the term neoliberalism, I'll go a little bit more into Gary Vee later. But he does bring up the idea of the brand, that each of us have a brand. And that means what we fit into some way of marketing ourselves. Easiest way of thinking of yourself as a brand. But a brand can be broken down in this. What is your niche? Who are you speaking to? What specific content are you making? And what audience are you doing it? And that's because as a brand, you are representing yourself. So let's talk about Casey's video. In that video, Casey Neistat is a brand. He is a brand of a very specific type of speaker. He curses, he says things that are a little edgy. He gets his start from being like this very interesting character in New York City, talking and amplifying edgy content. And then there's also Samsung. Samsung has to adhere to their brand throughout. So you see the phone appears several times with the Samsung logo. So the brand in that case is an object or a device. So these are brands that we've come to recognize. Then there's genre. What genre are you producing your content in? And what I mean by genre is that online genre or new media genre is distinctly different than television genre. If we were speaking into the camera now, this would actually be part of a reality TV genre as part of a reality TV show known as confessional. That's when you speak directly to the camera. But in terms of YouTube or any of those genres, there's so many genres that don't work on traditional media. Some are haul. If you don't know what haul is, that's when you go shopping and you get a whole bunch of stuff and then you show your audience what you bought. Some are unboxing. Literally, you unbox something. It's for the use of almost cathartic or ASMR. ASMR is its own thing because it's sound and visual and it makes you feel kind of calm or not. I don't know. It depends on how you feel. It pushes emotions across the screen. There is mukbang. There are makeup artistry. There is Let's Play videos. These are all content, internet content, that doesn't work in traditional media format. And that's because online genres are specific to the audience's niche. And so if you were to become an influencer, you would have to fit into a genre of some sort. We're all vloggers. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're video blogging or influencing through the screen, but a genre is really important. My genre here is education. Very simple, straightforward, very similar to Dr. Todd Grande's. I think his stuff is far better. But finally, that brings us to grammar. And that grammar means that every platform has its own language. Every genre has its own speaking way. Every genre has its own way of being within it. And that's grammatical. Similar to the way we use punctuation or the right proper way of writing a sentence with noun-verb agreements, video has to have grammar. I miss Vine so much because Vine was one of the best tools to show how video grammar worked. Because in its 6-second format, it was basically the length of a sentence, but in video grammar. So it was a way of telling a story across the screen in video grammar, but in the form of a sentence. But then so you made something, right? So you created content, you're an influencer, you have an audience, you picked your niche, you have your genre, you know what you're talking about, you're making videos. Now what? How do you get it to somebody? Reach. It's got to get out. Otherwise, you're talking to just yourself, which isn't a bad thing. That's my number one advice for starting out influencers, people who are just starting out as making web content. Talk to an audience you know. And who's the audience you know best? You. Talk to yourself because then you know that you're going to be listening. Somewhere out there is someone just like you, someone interested in the exact same thing. So when you're doing that, it works. It makes my job very easy. I know exactly who I'm talking to. I'm talking to a class. I'm talking to 50 of you across this screen. And that means I know exactly what my audience is. Whereas you're talking out into the ether, into the space. And that means you have to try a little bit harder. And it makes it easier if you just talk to someone who you would recognize, someone who you know is listening. And it's usually yourself. But then it becomes the difference between, and here's some terms you'll need to know, organic versus manufactured reach. Organic means it's just found. Somebody finds it and they amplify it themselves. Very rare at the beginning. Later, organic growth is pretty good. It means people come to you from word of mouth or from various parts of the internet. A lot of times at the beginning, there's two ways of doing it. Manufactured, I never recommend this. That means you literally buy followers. Don't do that. Most of them are bots. They don't do anything and it's a waste of money. Then there's amplification. That's another way of manufacturing reach. Amplification is done through collabs. That's where somebody else amplifies you. They find you, they promote you on their channels, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on Instagram, whether that's on TikTok. Somebody finds you and makes you part of their thing. Or you do a collab with another influencer. You literally do a co-produced project, and this way people could actually see you as part of it. We noticed that in Generation Like. That was like a very early version of what collabs looked like. Then there's strategy. So this is where your homework comes in. So for homework, you're going to be basically creating fake, this is all fake, okay? You don't actually have to do any of this. But what you're gonna do is premise a long form video. You don't have to make the video. You premise the idea that you're gonna make let's say a 3-minute video makeup artistry, okay? Let's just say, I'm gonna use that as an example. You're a makeup artist. For 3 minutes, you're gonna do makeup. What's your edge? What's different from your makeup channel than anybody else's? So that's what Gary Vee calls pillar content. The main piece of content, the big piece. It's like watching a TV show. But then you have to create a strategy of how people are gonna see it. So you create this 3-minute piece. It's a great makeup artistry piece. It's very well done. But now how do you get it out? So now you wanna promote it on different channels. So that's called micro content. And micro content is when you take pieces of your content, pieces of the bigger piece, and push it out onto different channels. And that's what you're gonna do in this inverted triangle thing that he's doing. And you could use PowerPoint, you could use Photoshop, you could use Word doc, however you wanna do it. Just make sure the biggest part explains what you made, fake. You made your big piece of content, and what type of micro content you're doing to promote it, and how you're distributing it. Now here's the most important thing. Not all of you will use every platform to promote your content. Some of you don't like Twitter, some of you don't like Instagram, some of you don't like TikTok, so don't use it. But note that if you make a makeup artistry piece, maybe you have a Twitter account. How do you write the tweet? I wanna see a sample tweet that you would be posting. I wanna know what the sample would be. So you write a fake version of it, and you can make a list of this. On Twitter, I would write this. On Instagram, I would write this. And the reason you do that is because each platform has a different language. You wouldn't say the same thing on Twitter as you would on Instagram because it wouldn't make sense to different audiences. Like you wouldn't say something on Instagram to Facebook because Facebook's audience is usually skews older. So you wanna make it more digestible. And you definitely wouldn't say the same thing on TikTok as you would on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's audience is more for networking and professionalism. So it's got to be written differently. So you have to have examples of each of those. The list is in the syllabus and it will be on the assignment. The last part is then the distribution, of course. So in a little bit, which ones did you use and why? So at the bottom, just a sentence of which ones you excluded and what made you not want to engage with those. And then the most importantly, I think, as a fun exercise, is I want you to return to your classmates' videos, the ones that they posted, their influencer content, and I want you to write constructive criticism. Never bad, okay? In this class, it's a judgment-free space. So I want you to go back to those videos and tell people what you liked about it. Did you like the way it was produced? Did you like what they talked about? Did you like their hobby? It's just a good way of letting people acknowledge that they are doing a good job. You only have to post once on somebody else's video, obviously not your own. And this way it's out there. And don't all pile on one person's video, because then one person has like 30 comments and the other people don't. Try to distribute how your responses and your constructive criticism and positive criticism can go. Yeah, it was also, one last note is that I was very interested in the fact that this year, unlike many others, is that how it's switching. Half of you produced vertical videos and half of you produced horizontal videos. And that's just a sign of the times, that you're becoming more used to the TikTok verticality versus the YouTube horizontal format. And as you're getting used to these verticals versus horizontals, you're kind of becoming more native to the new types of content distribution outlets. And that means the content is being somewhat dictated by the format of the distribution platform. So that's why when you're using Instagram stories, it's vertical. Or if you're doing TikTok, it's vertical. When you're doing YouTube, you're more likely to use this format, the horizontal format. I'm very much in favor of vertical video. I built a vertical video lab at another university. There's an entire lab you could go, and I like it because you fill the screen. You don't have to worry as much about your set behind you and designing it because there's all this extra space. Now, if I were showing graphics, like I sometimes do, it's good to have the extra space to my left and my right. But in the form of the way I'm delivering, it doesn't always have to be that way. But it is user's choice. How you feel comfortable producing content is how you make it work. And I was very happy you all participated. I was very happy to see this, and I'm very happy to see that as time goes on, the comfort level of distributing via video is becoming much more natural, because I think these are the tools of our future. And I think it's also very much, the pandemic showed us that we'll be using remote media technologies far more often than we've ever been used to. So you may as well have a head start. Until next time, stay curious, stay healthy.